All right. For you guys that are out in on the Zoom, Sarah put in the Slack a couple of handouts. There's a agenda that's out there in the Slack, and then there's also attached to that for those of you here, but there was also another document that was actually the objection handling. Some of the objection handlings that we're going to go through attached to the back of it that I just gave you, stapled. I'm referring to it like it's two things. The second thing is the actual updated listing presentation. So I think, Sarah, I don't know that I've set did you put the one that has your updates in it? Well, you're muted. She's in a different location too. Anyway, it'll be the listing presentation itself will be on Design Studio. I'm not going to be walking through this today, but I wanted to so you'd have it because we're going to reference it in terms of some of the areas and how you talk to folks about it. But it was just updated. Sarah did an amazing job of going through. We did a bunch of edits and some thoughts in the process. But after we go through the class, I'd love you guys to go through this as well and kind of look at areas where you feel like, oh, well, you know, this is a piece I've used in the past. A listing presentation would be helpful to have, or let us know. We're definitely open for feedback. And if there's stuff that you want to customize for your individual presentation for whatever reason, something you've done in the past or references or something, Sarah will work with you on that to get your updated template out into Design Studio. So you'll have that going forward.
Yeah. Let me just add quick. I don't want to take your time, but yeah, so that just landed in Design Studio. It's been updated, but as Paula said, you know, there's an agent bio page and a client endorsement page. Those could be customized further. This is, you know, a foundation that is hopefully useful to everyone, but if you're an agent that wants to, you know, add to that, we can customize it. So please reach out to me. This is kind of like the baseline for everybody, and then we can customize and add, especially if you have something that you talk to your clients about and you want to customize, we can do it. So please let me know.
And keep in mind, as we go forward, this is the listing presentation piece. It's not the full CMA. So right now for the full CMA, for the actual CMA piece, for the properties, for the comparable marketing piece, you would use like the cloud or the RPR. It's on MLS. Over the next month or so, we've identified the package we're going to. So we've started the migration over, or we will be starting the migration over, and you will have a fully integrated digital listing presentation with a CMA. That will all be one package. You'll be able to email it. You can email this too, but it will be an interactive email. So as they go into the comps and stuff, they'll actually be able to drill down into things and actually, or you can do it on site. If you're meeting with somebody, you can add in comps dynamically. If they say, hey, what about this property? We didn't hear about this one. You'll have that flexibility to do that as well. So, okay. Now, the other piece I'll just remind you is that we do have the soft and hard covers now in the offices with the heat binding machines in both Boston and East Boston at this point. Eventually, we will also have them out in the Brighton office so that you have that stuff available. And the copiers have been upgraded to make sure we can print brochures and all this good stuff out of there as well. So you can get good quality materials out of the copy machine. So the idea is that if you do need to print it, you'll be able to come in and do that grab and go stuff pretty easily. Or if it's a day Tina or Sarah or somebody, Sophia, somebody or myself is in the office and you need us to prep it for you so you can grab it, we're happy to do that for you as well and help you out with that too. So, okay. All right. So in typical Boston form, if I talk too fast, let me know. Or if you need me to go back through things, let me know, especially at this time of the afternoon. Sarah's going to share her green drink with me because that looks like what I need right now. A good shot of a green drink. Like, oh, that looks good. Okay, so I want to start with like why listings are important to your business. Why, as an agent, like there's people who like things, right? There's some people who like listings better than buyers, or they like working with buyers better than listings. But why are listings so critical to your real estate business? What do you think?
I would say it helps you grow in different ways. One, just all the information that you put together about yourself, but also about the market and to sell the client and why they should do it. Two, when you have a listing, you know, you're vetted to spread it out to all the people that think they could bring somebody to it. Three, I like nothing better than an open house because now I'm going to get more clients. And every now and then there's even somebody there that's buying, they don't have an agent. I can help you with that. Do you need to sell a house while you're doing that? I can help you with that. So I think it's just a great growth potential, like from one listing and how much more you could get from it. Does that make sense?
Right. So that is a really big piece of what Renee's saying is it's really about growing your business. It really is about like growing your business and leveraging that listing piece so that you can actually grow your business. You have open houses, so you're meeting more buyers, other potential sellers, right? A lot of people will come to open houses to try to see, hey, what is this agent all about and what are they offering? Because we're considering maybe getting a market evaluation on our house or figuring out what our house is worth or maybe putting it on the market. You have the ability to get your name out there, right? You've got a sign in the front yard in a lot of cases with your name and cell phone number. So it's like free advertising, obviously from a social push side and from an advertising piece, right? Again, your name is out there. So it's a lot of advertising and it is a lot of leverage, as Renee was saying. This is a big part of where a lot of top agents are heavy on the listing side. Now, the other piece of that is also that when you have a listing contract, right? And you have a listing, you're running to that property, but you're not running all over the place with them. So it has a higher probability once you have that listing contract versus a buyer rep agreement of actually getting to the closing table. Because you do have like, if you price it right and you do the right marketing and stuff, it's going to go under contract. Whereas a buyer, we can find them the right property, they're going to go to buyer contract, but it's not always the same probability in terms of getting to the closing table. So it's not, sometimes people say, well, I'm not good at it, but the reality is in this business now, especially the way the industry's changed, really on the buy side and the listing side, you need to be good with a client. You need to be good at having a conversation. You need to be good at getting them to sign a contract. So I don't think there's one that's easier than the other now. I think they both take a lot of work in different ways, but in terms of having a really good conversation with them, your skill set needs to be there. You get good at listings, it gets fun. It's really fun, right? Because it can roll pretty quickly. So it's really important that you have the confidence and the strong tools when you go in to actually help close that. And we're here to help you do that. Even for those of you that haven't had listings, obviously, once you have listings and you have a history to talk about, it gets easier, but everybody starts somewhere. Everybody started with their first listing. So that's okay. We're here to help you build those materials. For a lot of you, we say you leverage myself and you leverage the fact that we're the company and the team, right? To leverage those opportunities and to be able to get your name out there and get the sign in. The other piece I want to sort of add in here is that the terminology listing presentation I don't love. And here's the reason why I don't love it. Because really, honestly, this is more of a consultation, right? You're going in. I want you to remember when you have this opportunity, we're going to sort of talk about from the minute you get the appointment or setting the appointment with someone in a second. But, you really, if you've had that conversation and you're going in, it's because they're looking for your expertise. It's because they're looking for help from you. It's like they're looking to get sold. So just like with the buy side, assume it's your listing walking in the door. Talk like it's your listing. When we market your home, this is what we're going to do. These are the next steps. You'll find that that's a really easy close when you approach that from, as opposed to trying to sell yourself or trying to sell the company, because it's not going to be about that. The listers, sellers, just like with the buyers, all they care about is what's in it for them. How are you going to get them from here to the closing table with the least amount of pain and effort, and what needs to be done in those steps to help to get there, right? Unlike what we have on the buyer side, the listing side understands that 99% of the time they understand they need that help. They need that professional help in that syndication. And we'll talk about some of that in the objection handling as well. So I want to start with setting the appointment and like when you have that first opportunity. So somebody's either referred somebody to you, or somebody has passed along your name and somebody's called, or you met somebody in an open house, or you met somebody from the leads we're sending over, wherever this buyer came from, right? It should be starting with a phone conversation before we go out to meet them. So that phone conversation should be more than just setting the appointment. Obviously, the appointment is important because you want to get out to the house, you want to get in front of them, you want to see the property, you want to be able to talk about your value proposition, what you bring to the table. But that first phone call is an opportunity for you to gather as much information as possible so you can be prepared for that meeting. The more prepared you are for that meeting, the higher probability you're walking away with a listing contract right out of that meeting, okay? Now, there's considered in the industry, there's one-step and two-step listing appointments. A one-step means I go in, I've got my comps, I've got all my pricing, I intend to walk out there with a contract. A two-step is maybe you called me today, or maybe I just met you at an open house and you said, hey, come on over, take a look at the property, take a look at the house, go in, see the property, talk to them about what they're looking for, and then you would come back with the actual listing presentation and the comps and the CMA to go through with them. So we'll talk a little bit about what I think the advantages and disadvantages are, but a lot less two steps in the market nowadays than there used to be. And the reality is because a lot of times if you do 2 steps and I come in with 1 step, I've already got the contract, you're not getting back in. Right. So that's where you have to be careful. And that's why you really want to go in prepared when you have these opportunities to meet somebody. People are busy. They don't have time for this to be a long drawn out process. So I want you to think about that. So what kind of questions do you want from that discovery session? What kind of things do you think you want to know? Let's start with that. I mean, obviously, we talked about from the pricing workshop. For those of you that didn't go through it last week, I would point you back to that recording that's out there, you know, researching the property, looking at the public records and figuring out, looking at Google Earth, what can I learn about the property before I talk to them and or step foot in it? But what kind of questions would I want to ask them if I have an opportunity to get on the other end of the phone with them to set before I set the appointment?
Why they're moving, what their plans are.
Yeah, why are they moving? So what's their motivation, right? Why are we having this conversation? And in addition to that, Katie's saying, what's that timing of that? What is that? Is this something that's imminent quickly, or is this something in 6 months we need to be somewhere else for a job? Or yeah, so we definitely need a motivation. If you don't know the motivation, you're up against a losing battle because you can't kind of help direct them in the right direction. Timing is huge. What's your timing look like? Because that's going to help us set the plan in terms of when we hit the market, right? Can never guarantee something's going to go right under contract, and we never utter those words. I'm going to throw your listing on. We're going to put under contract this first weekend because the market could change between now and next week too much. So we don't ever want to do that, but we can kind of help set them up, and or we can handle the objections they might have where they're thinking, well, I don't really want to move until July or August, so I don't want to put it on right now. Well, we may want to put it on now so we don't miss the market, and we may want to build into that deal that you can either stay till July or August, or we close July and August to make it work for you. So there's all kinds of ways to be the solution for them right in that process. So what else is good to know? Timing, why are they moving? How about, have they done any improvements to the house? Right, so, I mean, in your time that you've been there, you'll know maybe that they've been there for 3 or 4 years or whatever that looks like, because you looked at the public records. You probably could see the property in MLS from a couple of years ago. It'd be nice to know when you're looking at that property, well, no, they got renovated it, or no, the kitchen and the bathrooms are all new, or, you know, what projects have you done or improvements have you made to the house while you've been there? Very helpful as you start to do your pricing stuff to really make sure you again, a little better armed going in. You're not going to have to work on the fly so much at that point. And then I also like to ask, what projects were you hoping to get to that you didn't get to? Because that's going to tell you where the downfalls might be in the property, right? Where something might be outdated, the carpets might be old, or maybe they didn't get to the bathroom and it's older. So they, you know, they would have liked to have done the bathroom if they stayed. Now, depending on how the referral came in, I don't always ask this question because sometimes if somebody direct refers me, I assume I'm the only agent in. And so it might not be appropriate. But if I don't know this person, I might ask them also if they're interviewing any other agents in this process. Now, some people are like, you really want to open that door? And some people have said to me, well, no, should we be? I'm like, no, absolutely not. I was just wondering if you had somebody else you had on the radar. No, I'm not going to be the person that helps you get this done, and we'll be in and I'll be in. But why do I ask that question? Because I want to know what the setup's going to be. Right. I want to know, am I going in and then they're going to need to say they can't do anything with me because they have other people booked, or are they going to be willing to go forward with me based on the timing? Now, based on that, where do you think I like to be in the lineup if they said, no, we have, because a lot of people think like 2 or 3 agents, they want to compare, even if they think they might know who they want to go with. Where do you think you want to be, or where do you think I want to be when I do the lineup like that? Sophia's over at me. Huh?
First, you want to be first.
I know. Why do I want to be first? You guys have been through my listing class before, so why do I want to be first?
You're gonna make the best impression and act like there's nobody else out there that you need to talk to.
I'm gonna get the contract. I'm gonna get the contract. I'm gonna cancel the other appointments for them. I'm gonna get the contract. So if I do a good enough job, they should need to waste their time and bring in other agents, right? If I go, some people like to go last because they feel like, okay, the people will be ready. They've met everybody. Again, there's a little bit of danger in that depending on the timing. So just keep that in mind when you're booking the appointment. And then from the pre-listing side, I mean, obviously you're going to ensure that you have good materials. You want to make sure you have good samples, even if you don't have your own yet, of like our brochures, our postcards, some of the materials, right? So keep in mind, and we've talked about this even from the buyer presentation side, some people are more visual. Some people are more analytical, right? Some people are going to want to dive into the numbers and the spreadsheets and the way you came up with the pricing. We did the pricing model. Other people are more visual and they want to see the pretty pictures and how do you make the house look good and how are you going to do all that? So we want to make sure that we're hitting both of those as well as we do our prepare work. There's no such thing as being over prepared. Put the time in, make sure you're comfortable with everything going into that, all the pricing you've prepared, the comparables, what do the neighbors' houses look like? I mean, especially when you're new and you're not really out in these markets, I would keep diving and think, okay, what other questions would I possibly need to know when I go in this place? It's a condo. So what else are there for condos around there? How do the condo fees look in that building compared to other buildings? Like where might my issues start to come up? Right? You just try to think of as many possible scenarios before you go in. And I'm happy to help you do that, especially as you do your first few, because I'll hit you with a lot of questions. I can do a full listing presentation prep and walk into a property without having been in the property pretty comfortably, as long as you do the right research and you ask the right questions. And you should really be in that position too, because that does look like now you know the market, you are the expert, even though you haven't been in the property. Now we'll talk about specific things with the property, but it really isn't that big of a difference usually, unless the property is in intense disrepair, repair, or needs, something beyond what you could have possibly thought or imagined, so. All right, so we've put all our materials together, right? We've got it well done in color, in nice binders. Now that we have all this nice material for you, we want to really stand out among the competition. So I'll tell you, it does make a difference when you show up. If you show up and you don't have the materials with you, like we've talked about in the pricing workshop, the spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet. Like I like to have the public record printed out. I like to have that Excel spreadsheet in a folder. I like to have any notes and I might have printed out some things in MLS for other comps that aren't in the CMA, but for my own reference, like of highs and lows, just in case they start, I get there and it's better or it's less than, just so I can work on the fly a little bit and not have to kind of dig. So don't be afraid to like print stuff out and bring it with you. Now, getting to the appointment, I mean, I like to talk about this. I probably shouldn't have to, but I like to talk about sort of how we show up and how we get to the appointment, how we present ourselves, right? So first and foremost, if you don't know where you're going, make sure you know where you're going and make sure, if you don't know the area really well and you have extra time, leave extra time to drive some of the comps if they're not that far from the property. A lot of times going to a listing appointment, I've driven by other comps just to see the area and the location and okay, this is what I know about the inside of that house. What do I know about the outside now? So that when I'm sitting across from the people, I feel comfortable that, yeah, I kind of know this area, right? It's fake it till you make it. If I don't know the area, I'm definitely going to try to do that as best I can. And I always tried to get to the neighborhood at least 15 or near the house at least 15 minutes early. Even if nothing else, to sit in my car, pump myself up. I always shut my phone off right before, like go back to the materials, look at the materials again. So my head's in the right place, like of what I'm going to talk to them about. And then you usually want to be knocking on that door 5 minutes early. And there's a lot of schools have thought of that, but people set their clocks all different ways. It's nice with the phones now because we are pretty much all in sync, but better a few minutes early and catch somebody maybe a little less ready than to be late in somebody's mind or for them to feel like you weren't respectful of their time. Couple of small things from a sales piece: knock on the door, step back from the door so that when they come to the door and you greet them, you're not standing right on top of them, or that the door's not going to hit you. I know it sounds stupid, but the door's not going to hit you in the face and you're not awkward, but step back. It's a less threatening piece. And it's, when you introduce yourself, it's, I'm Paula Kowalczyk. I'm here from Charles Gate. I've come to list your house, right? It's a assumptive close right out of the gate for my conversations with them. So going in, and keep in mind, if you're going to work on your computer, if you intend to work on your computer, don't have any expectation of using their network. You don't want to have to be asking for people's network passwords and stuff and put somebody at uncomfortable. Either have a hotspot or an Xfinity spot. They're so easy now to get those things for $30 or whatever. If you think you want to use your computer live, make sure you have your own way to do that, or download the presentation and all the stuff. But it's nice to have the MLS access in case you need to go into something on the fly. If you're not comfortable with it, then don't bring it. Don't make that print out stuff and then don't make it part of that, okay? You're going to have your listing presentation, your CMA piece. You're going to have your folder with your notes, and you're going to have your contracts ready to go, correct? When you show up, you're going to pre-fill out those contracts. If you're new, so you're not fumbling on the fly, you're going to have your contracts pre-filled out and with you so that you make it easy for them to sign, or filled out on the computer if you're going to have them sign in person, if you get real good with the technology. But I always had contracts pre-filled out, so all I had to do is fill in the price, Have them sign it. I don't have to fumble around with what goes in that field and what, I mean, that only came out of just not wanting to have to look stupid. But in the end, it being more prepared helps you get through the close faster and a little cleaner, so. All right, questions so far? I know some of the stuff is kind of basic, but I like to just remind people.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
Because I call on expireds, do
Yeah.
you think it's, because I do, it's like, so let me ask you something. What makes you think, why didn't it sell the last time that you had it on the market?
so that's a good point. If the property's been on the market recently, it's expired, you may want to ask questions. Why do you think it didn't sell? What did what do you think went well? What do you think could have gone better? Like, that'll give you some good insight into the relationship and what actually happened. Like, they may say, oh, the agent never did an open house. Well, now that's important to them, right? They feel
Okay.
like that's a piece that they missed out on, or and and maybe it's the pricing, maybe it's, as you dive in, you'll know more what that is. But yes, that's a good point, Renee.
Okay. Yep, thanks.
Same thing on the for sale by owner side. If this is a for sale by owner opportunity that you've reached out to and now you're getting a chance to put in front of them, what kind of traffic have you had? How have those showings gone? Have you been able to follow up with people? Did you do an open house? Like, getting a little bit of information from them in terms of what didn't work will help them. I mean, obviously at that point they bring you in. So we'll talk about FSBOs too. And we talk about the objections in a little bit too. Okay, so again, just stating the obvious, strongly recommend, I'm not going to tell you have to do it, but I strongly recommend showing up professionally. I'm not saying you have to show up in a suit and tie and the whole 9 yards, but show up professionally. I mean, you can always, you're never overdressed, but you can easily be underdressed for something. So in these kind of situations, especially when you're meeting somebody first time stuff, I always say make a good impression. Now, I'm going to add to that, I think it's even more critical when you know the people. So many times, especially even that first year when I was doing listing appointments, I knew people from the tennis court, or I knew people from friends, and I go out and I've seen a lot of real estate agents. They're like, well, I'm just going over to my friend's house. Shouldn't handle it that way. Show up as a professional. You need to show them that you are the professional, that you are the agent. You need to separate yourself from that personal relationship that they know, so that they can look at you professionally and respect what you're bringing to the table. I think that makes a big, big difference. Can make a big, big difference. Can make a big, big difference. So obviously, once you've introduced yourself, you come in. Again, sales 101, where do we want to sit, or where do we want to set up for them? Ideally at the kitchen table. Why? Because the kitchen table is where friends and family come, right? Dining room table is more formal to sometimes people they don't know. Obviously, it's going to make a difference based on their property and what's available, but little things, it's always easier to have a table where you can lay stuff out versus, having to sit at a couch, but you make it work wherever you can make it. But I used to, when I come in, and still do to this day, I'll say, okay, if you don't mind, I'll put my stuff down, but let's take a walk around your property if you don't mind first. So I can just see, so you can show me the property, and I can take some notes and stuff about your individual property and what we're looking at. Okay. And they love to show their house, right? They love to show their house. Now, what do I do in that walk around? Come at it from an agent. So I always took notes. I always had, whether it was stuff I worked on and then I was adding to it, but I always took notes, every single room. What are the features for the room? So actually, I was ready coming out of that appointment to put you in MLS pretty much. I only had to particularly ask a couple of questions. I don't want to have to go back into a property and do all that. I want to be able to draft it. But I would make notes like, okay, is there anything potentially when I walked in this room that visually doesn't work? Maybe does this something need to be restaged here? Because they might ask you that question, right? They might say to you, well, what do you need to do to get ready? What are the features of the room? Okay, it's very bright and sunny, or it's, it's the carpeting's a little, maybe we need to move the furniture around. Maybe we just need to clear clutter. And then I would just write some quick notes about, flooring type, crown molding type, any special lighting, any special windows, any special features. So basically start to write the features of the house. Now, as you go around the house, you're not going to walk into these rooms and immediately hit them out of the gate with, well, this isn't really working, or this is dirty, or this is ugly, or you need to clean all this up. It's going to be, oh, I love this, love the space. Or starting to talk about what you could do. I could see how we could lighten this up. Typically, I still remember going into a property and the woman it was really actually a beautiful property. It was really, really strong curb appeal outside. And I went in, she had those very, very heavy drapes. So like walking around the house, I'm like, it's just like, it's pretty, but it's dark. And it just felt heavy and it felt dirty because of these drapes. Like they would just these big old heavy drapes. So as we walked around and we were talking, I'm like, oh, this place is beautiful. And oh, looks like I can tell you had custom drapes made for the property when you bought the property. Is that something you're looking to take with you? And she's like, yeah, we were kind of hoping to do that. I said, you know, what we're probably going to do then is we're probably going to take those down before we list your property. Now here in my head, I'm going, oh yeah, I can get them off this thing. But
Exactly.
I'm setting her up for packing, but also I'm setting up for, I don't have to negotiate over something she really wants. Right. So look at that, because they will typically ask you to, what do you suggest we do before we go on the market? So I would take good notes. I'd ask questions about things as I walked around, including like, you know, what made you buy this house? Why did you love this property? Because right there, they're going to write your headline, aren't they, for the property? Well, we bought it because of the commuting location. We bought it because it's nice and open and sunny. And we bought it because it has this big back, beautiful yard. We love the location, the neighborhood. Whatever it was that made them buy, that's going to be critical information for you going forward as well. Because it's going to tell you how you're going to attract that next buyer. Who's the next buyer I want to bring into that property? And you're also looking as you walk around the house for that common ground. Like you're starting to build that relationship with them, right? You're starting to connect with them. You're showing some value in terms of what you can do for them a little bit. Again, not selling, just showing some value and having some good conversations. But I often found common ground, and I often found out I knew the people, even though they didn't think they knew me. Like, you know, one woman had tennis rackets in the corner. I'm like, oh, do you play tennis at the local club? I'm on the local team. Well, long story short, we've played against each other a couple of times, something. So like you have that instant connection, right? The more I can do that, the easier it's going to be for somebody to work with you. Or sometimes I've noticed like the kids look like they're probably the same age. I'm like, oh, you have somebody at the school, right? I mean, just whatever that is, whatever that common ground, that connection is. All right. So the biggest piece, any questions up to this point? We've kind of set the stage. So the biggest piece of once I go back to the table and I go to sit back to them, we're going to talk about what that conversation looks like, is this is not a presentation. You need to approach this like a consultation. And the way you win more listings is you be the person that asks the most questions and talks the least. If you're talking more than the sellers, you're probably not going to get the contract, right? If you're asking good questions and they're engaging with you, they're kind of look at it as, okay, she's really interested in this, or he or she's interested in this. They're going to help me get this, what I'm looking for. They're worried about my needs. They're worried about how they're going to help me. You're going to find that from a closing standpoint, that's way easier than you come in and you go, okay, let me tell you all about Charles Gate. Let me tell you all about the, you know, and by the way, following this listing presentation class, you know, I'm happy to have you guys go through your listing consultation, whatever presentation, and book a time with me. And actually we'll go through it. Like we'll act like the seller and have you come in with your materials and we'll actually go through it and practice and just talk through some of the scripts and stuff and see if there's areas we can tweak it. I've also gone on listing appointments with folks. So I'm happy to do that. Like you have an opportunity and we either pair you up with somebody, or sometimes I've gone out with folks because it's helpful sometimes to see how somebody handles that and how relaxed they are. Because honestly, that's the hard part when you're new, right? The hard part when you're new is like, oh my God, I gotta show my value. No, a top agent doesn't go in and worry about talking about themselves, do they? They don't talk about the company to no end. They talk about two pieces, which is what you're going to talk about with them: the pricing strategy and the marketing strategy. Those are the only two pieces they really care about, because that's what's in it for them. What am I going to get out of this property and how are you going to get that for me? That's all they really care about. So don't make it, as I used to say, I'm not going to make it the Paula show, right? This information is all going to be in here, and you might reference that at some point. Like all our information about the company and all the great things we do are in here, myself and my credentials. And if they don't know you, maybe give them a little highlight reel, but I wouldn't go crazy. Because again, I'm the agent. I'm the person that's doing this for you. And I used to say to them right out of the gate, I think there's two areas that are the most important for us to talk about today. And that's the marketing strategy and how we're going to get your house prepped to the market and ensure that you get a strong offer and contract on the table, and the pricing strategy, how we're going to price that to ensure that you maximize your return. Which one would you prefer to start with today? Okay. Now I'm going to remind you of something I said in the pricing workshop is we do not, and I want you to underline the not, we do not want to win listings on pricing. You do not want to win listings on pricing. You want to strategize with them the price that they want to go to market with. But you don't want to win a listing because you agree to a ridiculous listing price that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so I just want to reiterate that again so that, and you're going to have a conversation with them about that. I think in your objections, it talks about that, like, oh, another agent gave me a higher price. I can appreciate that, but do you want to know the truth? Or do you want me to just tell you a number so I can put a sign in your yard? Because I'm here to actually, I used to say to people, I'm here to actually sell your house. I'm not here to just market your house. I'm here to actually sell and get under contract to get you the money and get you out of the house. I don't want to just put a sign in the yard and then have to hit you later on because it's not priced properly. We didn't get the traction, because that's going to be, timing's going to be important in that. And you're going to talk about that with them. So let's talk about the pricing conversation first, because a lot of them will go to the pricing first. I mean, it's okay to go either way if you don't give them the option. Pardon me, I would start with the marketing, but a lot of them will go to the pricing first because that's all they care about is the bottom line. Now, that's another piece. I forgot to tell you that on the questions when I talk to them on the phone. You do always want to ask them, at what price do you think you want to list your house? At what price do you think you want to list your house? And they might say, well, I don't know. That's why I'm bringing you in. I'm like, I can appreciate that. And trust me, your price has no bearing on what I'm going to find in my market analysis. But everybody Googles and Zillows and searches and checks things out or knows what the neighbor's house sold for. So I'm just wondering, at what price do you want to sell your house? Or do you think you want to list your house? And they'll usually have a number. Now, some of you heard the story. There's two pieces to this. One of it, if you're 700,000 and my analysis shows that it's closer to 650, that helps me because now I know to go in with enough data to show you why you're not 7, right? I mean, now I know you've got a higher number and I need to show you what 7 gets in the market and how you're not that, so that I can get you into the right price point. The other part of that is I had an appointment. Somebody referred somebody to me. They were an hour and a half away. They were way out west somewhere. I said to the guy, what price do you want to list your house? He's like, oh, he said, oh, well, that's for you. I said, I know, but everybody's got a number. He goes 550. And he said it pretty quickly. So I'm like, okay. Did the analysis. I'm at like 450. I'm like, crap, like this guy is so far off. I almost called him and canceled the appointment because I thought, like, I don't even know if I want to go there. Like, I'm driving all this way out there for this thing. I'm going to have to drive out there to show it and everything. I almost canceled the appointment. I thought, no, it's a referral. It was for a friend. Let me go do it. But I literally walked in the door for this guy and I said, before I waste another minute of your time, I have to ask you a question. Where did you come up with the 550? He said, oh, no, I made it up when you asked me the question. I'm like, okay, because it comes in closer to like 450. You're okay with that? He goes, oh yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, it was like, but I got it out of the way right out of the bat instead of like trying to, but I kind of knew what I was up against, right? Because if he really did have that number in his head or he needed that number and 450 wasn't going to work, then the whole thing's going to be a waste of time. So it's more all about being prepped. So the pricing piece, we went through the pricing workshop. So I'm not going to go into establishing the price, but I do want to raise a couple of points here. You want to have, you're going to have your spreadsheet. You're going to pick your CMAs based on showing that value, right? Your conversation with a seller at this point should be more about, let me show you what the market looks like. Here's where here's what's sold. Here's things that have gone under contract and here's the numbers they've gotten similar to your house. And then that's usually like 3 properties, maybe 4 properties, right? It's not a ton of properties, and I might have more in my CMA, but I'm homing in on a couple that make the most sense because now I'm in the house. Now I know which ones to narrow in on. And Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's a couple of properties that are actually under contract pending that are also similar to your house that a buyer may have come into your house and they've put under contract. And then here's the competition. So when I do list your house this week or next week, based on whatever the timing was, these are the houses we're going to be up against as a buyer that's out there looking in the market, right? And you're starting to show them the different prices and what people are getting on these houses. Now, I know in my head a range, right? And I know in my head that I probably have a price, but 99% of the time, except for that time I walked in and said to the guy, it's closer to 450 because I was so thrown away. I don't usually talk about what my price is. I'm showing them what the market's data is showing them. So this house was on at 6, this house was on at 625. I'm narrowing them into my range potentially, right? Or should be at that point, so that they can make a decision on where to better price their house. So the conversation is not, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is what I would list your house at. It's Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based on what I've shown you in the competition and what's actually worked in the market, where do you want to strategically position yourself in the market? Now, there are a couple of good points in here in your listing presentation. and I don't think these have page numbers, but it's towards the back. There are a couple of good ones in here that talk about, making an informed, that's about the commitment, sorry, wrong one. Pricing your home, price it right for maximum exposure. You got a nice little triangle in there that basically talks about how, if we go too high up in the asking price, how we're probably going to leave money on the table, right? Because we're not going to hit the right number of buyers. So that's a good conversation for someone who thinks they want to go high and check out the market. So it's basically 3 strategies to pricing the house. Price it over market, price it at market, price it below market, right? If I price it below market, what am I trying to do? I'm just going to drive the market. I want more people. I want more bodies in here, and I want to try to drive that number up, potentially higher than it's even supposed to be, because I'm driving more people in and more competition. So I'm looking to set up that frenzy. We still have it out in the market today, but never assume you always get it, because it's not 100% across the market. It's very situational. Sorry, I got my dog walker in. It's very situational, based on the market, based on the price point, and based on the timing in terms of what's really going on for inventory and stuff at that point, right? So you have to kind of know what you're looking at there. When you're in a competitive market, when you're in a market where there's multiple offers, or okay, this is a high price point, this is going to be a desirable home, it's in great shape, like they're not talking about crazy numbers, you typically can't go too low on the price because it's going to drive it up. But I would say now in today's market, I'd be a little careful of that. A year or two ago when it was competitive, it was different. People are looking at the list price because there's inventory that's on the market. They're a little, yes, there's stuff that's coming in 100 and 200 over asking still, but it's very rare compared to where it was before. So I would have said to you like a year or two ago, don't worry about where you put it, because it'll drive it to where it's supposed to be and probably beyond. But you have to be a little more aware of that now. You need to make sure you don't go too far below where you think you want to be, so that you don't get those low ball offers. And you don't want the wrong crowd either, right? At that point, you need people in that can actually afford the property. If you go 100 below and you're attracting people that are 100 below, they may not have the bandwidth to go 100 over and actually get you what you need for that property. They'll be excited about it because they think they're getting a deal, but that doesn't mean they can get it. And that doesn't mean that's going to maximize what your seller is going to get. So that's, your conversation with them needs to be around, strategically pricing to maximize your return on this sale. Right? We need to ensure that we market it and get it out to as many people as possible with a strong strategic marketing plan to make sure we drive that interest, we drive that competition, because that's ultimately how you're going to get the highest return on the highest offer and the highest return on your deal. So you have that pricing your home for maximum exposure. It also has the 3 options to consider: pricing it below, above, and at market value. So you do have a little page in there towards the end as well that have that conversation once you get there with them. Questions on pricing? How do you handle it now? I've presented the facts, I've presented the data, and I'm driving you don't know this, but I'm driving you to like a 649, 650 price is where the sweet spot probably is going to be for your property, right? So I'm kind of driving you in there, and I say to you, okay, at what price do you want to price your house? And you now say, well, it looks like probably 700. How do I handle that?
Why do you think that?
Yeah, I can appreciate that. But based on what we looked at, let's go back to what we take a look at. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm happy to take a look at that conversation. But if I put you on at 700 and now you're out there against this house at 700,000 that has all updated kitchen and baths and an extra bedroom, and it's bigger and it's in, it's on a closer part of town, whatever the difference is, how do you think that shows up against that house if we put you on at that same price? So my question to you is, do you want to be the house that helps sell the other house? Or do you want to be the house that sells because the other house helped you? Right? So you have a conversation about what do they really want for an outcome? Why you can't say, and you don't want to make them wrong, but you almost have to show them how ridiculous that looks based upon the competition. And then if it's still not really working, and I think I talked about this in the pricing workshop, I always bring in the car analysis. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I bring you a Mercedes-Benz and I bring you a Ford, be careful what car you use based on what they have in the driveway. But I tell you, you can have both of these cars at the same price. Which one are you going to pick? Right? So we're in the same situation. Love your house. It's beautiful. It's fabulous. It's going to sell, but I want the right buyer to come in this property. I don't want to be driving the wrong buyer in, because that only gets frustrating for you. Right? And what happens if we look at that chart, if we look at that triangle, if I price it high at 700, what happens? I limit the number of people that come into your property that actually should be buying your house and can afford your house, because they're not even picking it up in the search because it's too high. And now you're going to miss that initial market surge on top of it. So let's relook at that. Do you want to reconsider what that pricing might be? Right? Okay. Now, on that note, if somebody's really adamant about pricing that really doesn't make sense, I have said, I appreciate that and I wish you really good luck, but I'm not in the business of just putting a sign in the yard. I'm in the business of selling houses. And unfortunately, I don't think you're setting yourself up for the best sale situation with that price. And so I'm going to pass on this listing. And people are like, wait, what? Now you're going to do what? Right? But you have to think about that. You as a listing agent are going to invest money in photography. You're going to invest your time. You're going to invest your reputation. If you have a reputation for putting listings on and not getting them sold, you don't want to be that agent in town. I loved those agents in town because I buried them. I took their listings after they were gotten killed on the price. I went in, got the right price, looked like a hero, sold the property. In the meantime, they're running around spending all the money on everything. And I mean, really, honestly, it's not a long-term business strategy that's going to work for you. So it's much better to have an honest conversation with them about the pricing right from the gate and say, well, and so that's the other piece. This is where we think you'll end up, and this is what we should price it at to get you there, right? There's two components there. So good. Any other questions or thoughts on that process? Feel like you have a good conversation to have that with them. We'll go through some objection handlers in a minute on some of this, but. So the next part is the marketing differentiation, really, and how, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, one of the most important things we do when we take the listing in your house is ensure that it has the proper exposure and it has the right buyers coming to your house. Ultimately, I only need one person with a check and an offer form to come in and give it to you to get you out of this house. But I want to make sure we cast a wide enough net to ensure we get the right buyer and we get the best possible price. So you've got a couple of things going on in the market. First off, you've got a lot of agents talking about off-market listings. We want to have an honest conversation about what that means to a seller. If they say, well, this company promised us, they've got a ton of buyers and they promised us an off-market listing, right? What's the response to that? Well, I can appreciate that. But again, I want to cast the widest net. You think the widest net is being cast by just one company that may only have 1 to 5% of the buyers that are out in the market in their database and not making sure. I mean, we got people coming in from out of state. We got people coming from all kinds of areas all the time when we list a property. If it's not out and syndicated out to the markets where everybody can see that, you have no guarantee that the person who would pay the most money for your property found your property. So off-market listings, they have a place, but they should not be something we are driving people to. And there's a lot of those conversations in the space right now because there are companies trying to drive everybody into that. They want to keep their own database, their own MLS. They don't want to share the listings. But honestly, that is not the best thing for the seller. The best thing for the seller is to have that syndication and ensure that that listing gets out to the market so that they can get the most money for that listing. So let's talk about how we ensure that we get your property the proper exposure. First, and you've got tons of material in here to use as a reference, but first and foremost, it's going to be appearance and setting the house up, right? Whether that's staging, light staging, but getting it prepared for photography. So that's where you can have a conversation and take your notes. So Mr. and Mrs. Sellers, I walked around, there's a couple things I'd probably suggest as we go forward and you're ready for me to list the property that we would do to prepare for the photographer to come. Now, I'm not going to tell them all the things right out of the gate there. I might take that down the line, but I'm going to say, we will make sure we set the stage for your house so that people can see themselves living in your property. Some people, that's a harder conversation than others. Oh, they can see past it, or they, unfortunately, a high percentage of people cannot. And keep in mind your photography and what we put out on the internet and what we syndicate out is what's going to draw people in. So bad photography, and you see this all the time. I've listed so many properties that I'd show up at the property and go, wow, this is actually really a nice house. Like the photography doesn't show me this at all. The minute we did professional photography, set the stage a little bit, the traffic drove like crazy to the house. So that's the first eyeballs on a house. People are going to look at those first couple of photos and make a decision of whether they even care to consider the next steps of anything with your house. And so I have to make sure I catch them and get them into your property, right? So we're going to set the stage by setting your house up the right way. Now on the back note for you, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. As an agent, typically you should be prepared to do what I call light staging, which is the things like the taking the drapes down and the, making sure the counters are cleaned up, telling them what to do, like to prep stuff, putting personal photos away, you often hear, like really making it look, if they've got kids and stuff, trying to minimize that stuff into a room or putting toys away and stuff so that people can really visualize the whole space. You also want to look at when you walk in a room, like lighting can make a huge difference. If it's too dark in the room and there's not enough lighting, maybe even bringing in some additional lighting. And also furniture placement is huge. So many times you go in a house and it's like, it looks small just because of the way the furniture is placed. And if you open up that room when you walk in, maybe it's not how you would live with it, but you open up that furniture when you walk in that room and now all of a sudden the room feels bigger and they can see themselves moving around and seeing the property. You also want to make sure there's nothing in the way of actually like walking around and looking at the property, like at open houses and when you do showings, like, I've had people who have tables in weird spots and they're used to walking around, but we don't want that. We want people to be able to move around the house the way they would move around the best way. So that would be light staging and prep for photography. If they need a professional stager, then you should have that book available. That's not something I would say you offer to pay for because that's going to cost you a lot of money really fast. But you can say if they ask about staging because it's a vacant property or they're going to be moving out, you can say, well, let's take a look at it because we have a couple of options. You have virtual staging if it's empty, right? And I can bring a stager in. Virtual is way cheaper than bringing a stager in, obviously, and it has some ups and downs to it or some advantages and disadvantages. Staging runs you a good amount of money. You're talking about usually a couple grand, depending on how many rooms you're looking at, plus a monthly charge. So again, unless you're talking about a really high-end listing, you're not talking about bringing in a professional stager. Now, I have in the past worked with some of the stagers, and it's hard to find them because of the timing and the money with them. But I've worked with some stagers in the past that would come do like a consultation with a client. So they would come and like recommend moving a couple things around. But so they kind of would use the stuff that clients had. So sometimes if it's a property you walk in, you're like, this just could be like lived in better. It could be positioned better for sale. You might recommend somebody, if you don't have the eye for that, recommend bringing somebody in that has an eye for that and doing like a consultation fee or setup. Let's keep that in mind as an option. But presentation is everything. It needs to be presented in today's world. It needs to be presented in its best possible light. Unless it's a tear down, that place needs to be cleaned up, organized, cleaned of crap. And if anything, say to them, go get bins and pack like you're going to move anyway. Pack the stuff away, stack it up in your garage, and let's get it pre-packed, and we'll just make it easier to market. Now, you do have in here, you have our proven process, which is like the way to achieve the best results. So use this as a way to kind of go through and prep yourself in terms of what we do. But it talks about the pre-listing. It talks about the on-market, how, when it's live, what we're going to be doing. It does talk about positioning it in terms of capturing the photographs, the floor plans, the Matterport tours. I would talk about how important it is to ensure that the property is written up properly in MLS. Like the presentation of photos can be really important. How many listings have you looked at and the first photo was like not eye-catching and you move on and then you go back and you look and you go, why wouldn't they have put this photo first? Right? Those first 2-3 photos are so critical, especially that first one, because that's on everything that hits the internet and stuff. So, we make sure that we really properly position that. I work with my marketing manager here at Charlesgate to make sure the copy in your text is appealing and stuff. And as we put it out to social and we start to syndicate you out, we know what audience we're looking to attract. And we work our copy and our wording and our pictures and everything right around that. Because again, that's going to maximize what you get on this property, right? That's going to bring the right person into your house and maximize what you get. It does talk about, there's a whole on-market stage in here about how when it launches on MLS, sort of that plan. I mean, anything on the prep side, letting them know you're going to schedule professional photography. You shouldn't be taking photos with your iPhone, please, unless it's a rental or, and then if you do, make sure you know to put the camera the right way. I can't remember now, is it up and down or sideways? But one way goes in MLS the right way. I think you have to hold it up and down because I always want to do this. Yeah, this way. Okay. Yeah, so like you need to know what you're doing, but still, professional photos on a house should be a given. Should be a given. It's worth the money, and there's enough good people out there that aren't charging an arm and a leg to do that. Now, floor plans and the other stuff you may need to think about depending on the listing price and what people are doing, and whether it makes sense. Like some houses don't really need them. Other houses, it's like, oh, this is going to be hard when somebody comes in. I might want a floor plan that they can then work with. And a lot of times the sellers will have a floor plan from when they bought or something they can share, and you can even work from that. And then talking about like how the property is gonna get syndicated. There's a section in here, a closer look at the details section, and it has the digital marketing, the traditional marketing that goes through the floor plan, the photos, it goes through. And again, I wouldn't go through this sitting there with them, but you should be familiar with this so you can talk about that. We do a custom website, property website on all our listings. So you can talk about that to ensure we get them out there, how we do some advertising. Sarah's got a lot of stuff in here, the web campaigns, how we ensure we're out across the internet, how we're syndicating out to over 50 sites once it's hitting. I mean, there's a couple listed here, but we syndicate out to a ton of sites. This is what the social media looks like. Because ultimately we know, it's a very visual world, right? And a very high percentage of buyers start on the internet before they ever get to your house. They're not driving by and happen to see an open house sign. They're starting on the internet. So we need to make sure that we're presenting your property in the best possible light to attract that buyer in. More people I attract in, again, the better opportunity we have to get that contract. Questions on the marketing piece? When you're preparing for one, couple things I just want to sort of keep in mind. Again, make sure you bring a sample brochure, and you want to make sure you're doing brochures for your properties because that's also advertising for you. But we have really nice brochures here that Sarah's set up. You want to bring a couple samples with you to show them that I've gotten a lot of listings just from that of like, oh, that's really nice. Because a lot of agents do it and don't think to show people like, this is how we'll present your property so that people can take it with them and they'll remember your property. If they go on a tour and they see 6 or 7 of properties, we want to make sure that they remember your property when they walk away. And then there's a thing in here on the staging. If you are going into, first of all, a high-end luxury property, you should always reach out to both Sarah and I before you even put stuff together so we can go through how you're going to differentiate yourself. So if you're looking at something like a 2.5, 3 million up, let's make sure we have a conversation before you put all that together, because you want to elevate this to a new level in terms of making sure you use the hardcover. Maybe talking about an 8-page brochure versus a 4-page brochure or a 12-page brochure. Maybe adding in some video stuff. Like there's definitely stuff we're going to want to add in there based on that property for that property value. And especially if you've got like a really high-end listing that's got like a lifestyle around it, like it's a beach property or on the water or in the city or somewhere where like we're going to want to add in that lifestyle element from the sales piece too. That's something where both Sarah and I can help you make sure you go in very well armed. Don't do those by your, you shouldn't do any of them by the seat of your pants, but definitely don't do those. Make sure you're going in with enough information. All right, so I want to look at this. I think there's a piece in here I wanted to go back to. Let me find it. I think the piece in here that's got this, excuse me, on market stage selling your home page. It's got the arch photo in the bottom where it just kind of talks through the whole process too. Is not a bad point to go back through potentially if, especially they haven't sold a house in a long time, just sort of how you help get them through that entire process, right? The biggest piece, excuse me, the biggest differentiator here is negotiating skills. That's where sellers don't know where they get killed. They hire an agent, they think, oh, this agent's going to do a good job. The agent has 0 negotiation skills. What happens? They take the first offer that comes along. They don't know how to work an offer. They don't know how to truly ensure that we maximize out of the return. So I think that a little conversation around that goes a long way, because a lot of agents won't necessarily address that, but just say, one of the important parts of this process for you is ensuring that you truly have a strong negotiator on the other side of the table. And that's one of the things I'm really good at. There are scenarios where we've gotten an extra 10, 20, 30,000 out of a potential buyer by having the right conversations and the right setup, whereas someone else might have brought you a listing and an offer and just said, oh, here, accept it. Well, no, let's negotiate it. Maybe there's room for negotiation on this. Maybe we need to go back. So there's a fine balance between getting more money and having somebody walk away on you. So we want to make sure we keep people on the table, but also make sure we get the best deal and the cleanest deal, because it's not always just about price. It's also about terms. Who's going to actually get to that closing table, right? Knowing the agent that's at the other side of the table and how the offer was written and all of that stuff, being able to have a good conversation around that's going to be really critical. So saying multiple times over the course of that time with them, ultimately my job is to get you to the closing table or get you that closing check, right? Or get you the sale proceeds. reminds them that this is ultimately all set up to get them that the bigger check. The bigger check. All right, anything else in this listing stuff we haven't talked about? I don't think so. I think we've covered all the sections. I would familiarize yourself with it. Again, if there's something you want to add in here that you feel more comfortable with. And again, there's not a right or wrong way to go through this. I think you have to figure out what you feel more comfortable with, like how you feel comfortable presenting yourself, but don't spend too much time on overselling the company, overselling you. Like the more you do that, the more it sounds like you don't know what you're doing, because that's not how a top agent is going to go in. So I want to talk a little bit about the commission pieces in here, because then we're ready for the conversation. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it looks like we're going to go with the 559, whatever the pricing was. I've got the contract here ready to go. Let's sign the contract. Okay. Close the deal. More agents, I've coached so many agents over the years that have gone in on listing presentation. I'll say, how'd the listing presentation go? It went fabulous. Did you get the contract? No. Why didn't you get the contract? I didn't ask. Like, we're sitting at the table. That's why having that contract filled out and ready to go is so important. Like, don't be afraid to put the contract in front of them. Okay, let's get this going. Sounds like you have a very short time frame. We know what pricing we want to put it on at. Let's get the contract signed so we can talk about the next steps. And you can go jump right into the next steps with them at that point. How long should a listing presentation take? Anybody out there have a thought? I hear 30 minutes here.
An
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah,
door to
okay.
door.
Yeah, 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the property and how much you knew going in and stuff. If you're going over an hour, I need to ask you, are you talking too much? Are you not asking enough questions, or are you talking too much? Right, so be careful you're not overselling, and make sure you're not overselling yourself out of a listing. Now, there is another strategy, which is you can send over the listing piece, this piece without the CMA ahead of time to sellers so that they can review it. They can review about you and the company and the marketing and all that we do, so that you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. You can also ask them when you go in, okay, did you get an opportunity to go through that ahead of time? Do you have any questions about it? Like, you know what I mean? So sometimes that's a good opportunity. And I've done that where we used to drop off pre-listing packages to the listing ahead of time. And then I'd go in and would take a look at the property and say, oh, do you have an opportunity to look at this? And they'd say, I did. I said, okay, do you want to talk about pricing, get the contract signed? They're like, yeah, let's go. So it's like, sometimes you can jump right into that closing because they've already got some information on you. They know what they're looking at. So that is a good, and now that everything's so digital, that's not a bad way to kind of get stuff in front of them so they don't feel like if they are a reader and they like to look at everything, that gives them a chance to do it at their own pace ahead of time. So don't forget to ask for the deal. You have some objection stuff in the back here. So my next question to you is the commission piece before we go into the objections. What do we take a listing for? You're all going to have the right answer to this question, right?
When I wear my tuxedo, 8%.
There you go. There you go. What are we putting on the contract as the listing agent for a listing? 3%. 3%. We shouldn't be talking about anything except for 3% on that listing contract from a listing side. You're going to do all the marketing. You're going to put the time in. And guess what? This NAR issue last year, if nothing else, helped us get back to the commissions we needed to be at, because everybody was talking about 6% in the place. So now you're talking about 3%. They're not even batting an eye. If they say, well, somebody else would do it for a lower commission, well, you have the objection for that. Your commission's too high. Can you lower it? Listen, my job is to get you the highest price for your house. And ultimately, it's not about my commission. It's about what you net out of this deal, right? It's about what you walk away from this sale. And do you think an agent that can't negotiate their own commission or get what they're worth can negotiate when your house at $550,000 is on the table in an effective way? So really, it's more important about what we can net out of this. And I do believe we're going to net more, right? And also, I would question if that agent is discounting their commission, where are they cutting corners from their marketing? Because there's a lot of things that I'm investing in here that does take some money, and I'm willing to do that for your property with an assumption that it's going to close. But, again, we need to make sure there's a lot of people here. This is our marketing fee. If they say, will you lower this to 2.5% and 2%? What's the actual response? You don't have to jump into the objection handling. I used to just say no. I said, no, I take 3%. And I was doing this in a market where I was taking 6% in a market where the agents were sitting across from me taking 4%. And so sellers were like, well, they're saying they'll do it for 4%. Again, I'd question what you're going to net out of that deal. Because ultimately my job is to net you the most money. And they'll say, well, would you take the 4%? And I'm like, no, I won't take the 4%. You thinking, you go to a doctor who's going to do heart surgery and say, well, hey, by the way, will you give me the lower price? No, you would never do that, right? So why would they do that on the agent side? You just have to, and sometimes just saying no, they'd be like, oh, okay. And they just move on. If they just feel like they have to ask the question. So don't get defensive about it. Just answer the question. And then if they come back again, use the objection handler. And if they keep pushing, just say, I'm sorry, it's 3% on the listing side. We can talk about what you want to offer out to the buy side. Maybe if they're saying 5, you can say, well, it's 3% on the listing side. We can talk about how you want to approach the buyer side of this. And if you want to offer 2% on the buy side, that's fine. We can do that. But typically that gets negotiated in the contract, but my listing fee is 3%. Okay. I shouldn't be seeing any contract come through with anything under 2.5% without getting prior approval. Because there's too much liability and too much cost involved in these to be doing that. If you can't do that, then we need to spend some time on your skills in terms of really having good conversations. Even if it's somebody you know and related to, they should respect it even more. So I had friends and families that I sat across from a couple, they were really good friends. And I was always 6%. I never took anything less. I didn't take the listing if they wouldn't do it. Like, that's what I would do. Maybe go to 5 and take 3 and 2, right? Because at the time we knew what the Coburg was, but I would never go below that. And he said, well, we're not going to list with you. So I said, okay, well, I appreciate that. And I wish you good luck. I started packing up stuff. The wife goes, wait a minute, what are you doing? She's not going anywhere. Sign the damn contract. Like, sometimes you have to take it off the table too. Like, no, I'm sorry. That's, not what I do. Not what I do. So they're going to end up paying it anyway. The reality is they're not going to get the service. An agent that is undercutting their commission is typically not delivering at the high level of service. And by the way, and this was my favorite response, if they don't know how to negotiate their own commission, how are they going to negotiate when your house is on the line? Because really that's ultimately what that's telling me, that they're willing to take below market value because they're not going to offer you enough to do this at market value. Right. It's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy conversation. It works. And if it doesn't, do I want to work with that person? Probably not anyway, because guess what? At every turn, they're going to try to nickel and dime you and take money out of your commission. If there's an inspection issue, they're going to be looking for you to pay for it. If there's that's just how it's going to work. So better to work with somebody that comes out of the gate from a reasonable standpoint anyway with the pricing and has better expectations. So you're going to have that conversation about the commission. I would have it written in the contract when I showed up. So it doesn't have to even be part of the conversation. They're just going to sign. And the conversation is, do you want to offer buyer compensation, talking about the current laws? Do you want to offer buyer compensation? And if you would like to, what do you think you would like that to be? Or do we want to keep that open to negotiation based on what they put in the offer? Which is typically what I would recommend in this market right now. Most of the agents aren't putting in 3% like you are in the buy side, and they're putting in like 2%, which is crazy. That's stupid. Yeah. Okay. Questions, thoughts on that so far? My word of the day, questions, thoughts. You guys are a quiet group today. All right, so I just want to talk about a couple of these sell objections before we wrap up. See what you think about these. We want to price it higher and see what happens. What do we know happens if we price the house higher and have to chase the market? Ultimately, they will end up with less money. And you can pretty much, once you start to know a market, you can find the examples of that pretty easily. I used to have examples in my back pocket. Mr. and Mrs. L, this house came on the market. It was here. This is what they should have gotten. Now they're at here, or they closed it here. And part of the reason was they chased the market down. They missed that initial syndication. They missed the right buyers out of the gate. And then people started to worry because they were doing price reduction. Something was wrong with the house, right? And so once I've sat on that market, what happens? I don't typically get over asking. I get under, right? So people are, I'm always going to leave money on the table. So pricing it right to drive the right people in to ensure that I get the right syndication is so critical to a successful sale. And by the way, and this, I always love to do this on a listing presentation. By the way, that first offer we get on the table tends to be your strongest. Those people that are willing to step up the fastest doesn't necessarily mean a ton of people are going to follow them, but they tend to be the strongest offer you're ever going to see. So if nothing else, we're going to work real hard. If you only get one offer, we're going to work real hard trying to get them to a good number and keep them on the table, because those people that show up the quickest and they tend to be the best from a number standpoint before time has passed. Why do I like to set that up? Because when an offer comes in right away and you don't want the seller going, well, we got one right out of the gate. Why don't we wait and see what happens? Wrong, right? No, we set this up so you would get this offer right away and put it under contract. Because the more we're on market, remember, that's going to take out of your pocket. We don't want to do that. Another agent said they could sell it for more. Well, again, that gets into the conversation around, you know, do you want to hear what you're really going to get out of the market and the correct way to position it? Or do you want me to just tell you what you want to hear? Right? This is about having an honest conversation. I'm here today to have an honest conversation about this is where the market is. This is where we're going to truly net the most money out of this deal. Right? This is where we'll get the most money out of this deal. We want to try selling it on our own, for sale by owner. I can appreciate that, again, that you think it saves you the commission. But I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, most for sale by owners don't go under contract. They end up listing with an agent, so they lose that market time. And ultimately, what you and I have talked about, where you net the most money from the deal, is really what's most important. So it's worth having that marketing and the negotiation and the syndication behind you to ensure you get the most money. On the other side of that, playing into the for sale by owner, you know, you can play into sort of, are you prepared to let strangers into your house that haven't been vetted? You know, that just show up at your door. Are you prepared to work the negotiations on the contract? You know what the contract looks like and the things to watch out for on the contract side. So, you know, there's a couple of fear factors you can kind of bring into, and they're like, oh, well, I have an attorney. It's like, that's great. But again, you're going to be showing it. You're going to have to do the open houses. You're going to have to do the marketing piece. So most, I think 97 or 98% of for sale by owners fail. So it's a very small percentage that actually get under contract. And I bet a majority of them, if I went back and looked at the records and did an analysis, they got less than they probably would have with an agent paying the percentage. So they actually leave money on the table doing that. Your commission is too high. We already answered that. The answer to that question is no. We need to think about it. So that's a good one, because it's like, I completely understand you're making a big decision. But keep in mind, so here's the good thing about we need to think about it. They're not saying no to you, but that does tell me they have unanswered questions. And so that's what you kind of want to address. So I can appreciate that. And I appreciate it's a big decision, but I usually find when somebody says that, it's because there's a question I haven't answered. Is there still things that we need to look at in terms of the marketing or how we would get this on, or the pricing that you want to dive back into? And a lot of times they'll be like, well, yeah, I'm kind of not sure about this. Like they haven't fully grasped a piece of it, or they're not relating to a piece of it. So just asking them, what can I explain? You know, what can I go back into more detail for you? We have a friend or family member who is an agent. And I used to love the one of like, there's an agent in our neighborhood that sells everything. Again, I can appreciate that, but if they don't have the experience and the expertise, you know, that can put you in a tough position. Because here's the problem with family and friends. They're not going to have an honest conversation like you and I are having about price and things, because they're going to want to please you and they're going to want you to like them at the end of the deal. And honestly, I don't care if you like me at the end of the deal, as long as you got the right amount of money in your pocket. People would laugh at that, right? So the other angle to that I sometimes would play, especially when it was like a neighbor or as a close friend, it's like, listen, this is a financial transaction that involves, and sometimes some private information that sometimes people don't feel comfortable with sharing with people outside of, you know, in their network or in their circle and stuff like that, you know, there's some things that we'll dive into here that you may not want to have other people know your business. If they continue to push and it's a family friend, what can you do? Say, listen, I'm happy to offer them a referral fee, but you really deserve having an expert do the deal for you and list your property, ensure you get the most money out of the deal. And I only offer that referral if they really push back. Like they got to push hard. And then I don't usually even go 25% on something like that. I would go less. I'd go 15 or 20 at least. We're not in a rush to sell. That gets back into their why. What's their motivation? Why are they even having you in to talk about this? What was the timing that they needed? And then talking about sort of, well, we know what the market is today, and this pricing I've given you is based on today. I can't tell you where the market's going to go tomorrow. Now, what you have at your advantage right now that you didn't have a year ago when somebody said, well, I'm just going to wait and see where the market goes because it's still going up, it was still going up, right? Now the market's dipped down a little bit in most of these cases. So most people don't believe from the seller side that if they wait, they're going to get more money right now. So that's a little bit of an advantage right now in this market, but you got to be aware of what the market's doing. Because there are markets where they feel like, well, let me just wait and see where it goes. Well, guess what? The interest rates could change. Something could happen. 9/11 changed what the pricing was, right? So stuff can happen. We can't control that. I can just tell you what the pricing looks like today or what we could do in today's market. And by the way, between now and us actually getting to the market, by the time we do the photography and everything, we will assess the pricing again one more time before we go to market to make sure we're still aligned. Because it may have gone up a little bit in those couple of weeks, depending on what's come on the market or gone under contract, right? We're going to interview other agents, and I, again, I completely respect that. Choosing the right agent is an important decision, but let me ask you, what qualities are you looking for an agent? So I think, a lot of times with that one, I used to go into the close, and then if they'd say, well, we have a couple of other appointments, or, so I'd say, well, are you concerned about having the other agents come in because you've already set the appointment? And they're like, well, yeah, we don't really want to cancel. I'm like, I can appreciate that. Or they'll say, oh, the other agent said they have buyers for our property. I'm like, I can appreciate that. I'm happy to reach out to them, let them know that you've gone to market, that when we'll be on the market, I'll give them all that information so that they can bring their buyer's agent in. All right, shut that right down. Shut that right down. And also, I did offer to cancel other appointments because sometimes people are just uncomfortable with that. And some people would take them up on them. Others were like, no, we're okay. Once they signed the contract, I didn't care what they did, but I'm happy. The other agents didn't love it when I called them and said, by the way, a lot of times you'd see it and they go, don't tell me, you already took the listing. Like, yeah, I did. Sorry. They always were trying to get in ahead of me. They just always had a hard time sometimes. But yeah, just ask them why they think they need to do that, right? If you've assumptive closed through this whole thing, it should be a pretty easy conversation. The other thing that I, from a sales approach standpoint, so I always had the completed contract that was all pre-filled out in front of me at the table with a pen. And I looked for multiple opportunities to put that contract in front of them. I didn't wait till the end of the conversation. So if there was an opening where they started to now talk about, yeah, so before we go on the market, can you tell us what would we need to do about this and stuff? I'd say, perfect, let's sign the contract. I stop where you are. You do not now need to go through and blabbermouth about the photography and everything. They've already decided they're going to use you. That's why I see agents get into trouble. They're like, oh no, I didn't go through my steps. No, they just told you they're going to use you. Believe them, they're going to use you. Put the contract in front of them, have them sign it. Even at that point, if they go, oh, we're not ready to do that. Okay, well, let's talk about what else we need to go through to get you comfortable with that. I didn't care if I presented that contract 3 times. By the time I put it in front of them the 4th time, they were ready to sign it or whatever that took, right? But making sure that it's all filled out and ready to go and here, sign here, and we can move on. Make it easy for them. And I will tell you, and I just got feedback on this again recently, it was on a much bigger project, but I brought a pre-filled out contract to the appointment. I had already signed it as well and left it with the person, the seller. And he said, that's why I'm going with you, because I love that you were that confident you were going to get the listing, that you had the contract ready to go. Right? It's assumptive close. It's my listing to lose when I walk in the door. I already have the listing and I'm going to talk like I have the listing. It's mine to lose and screw up. So I just need to make sure I don't talk myself out of the listing. Is really, if you approach it that way, you'll have a very high conversion rate. You'll have a very high conversion rate. So feel better prepared. Anything we didn't go through from the listing side that you'd like me to talk about, or questions, or anything, Sarah, from your side on the marketing side that you'd add in?
I've got no add-ins.
Everybody's so quiet today. It's the afternoon. Everybody needs a little caffeine. Mike, it's nice to see your face too. I see you're sitting in the East Boston office. Love that. So you're all going to go get listing appointments right now. So again, we've done the pricing piece last week. Now we've done the listing presentation. Nobody's reached out yet to do a pricing with me. I'm not sure why not, but again, I would encourage you, even if it feels uncomfortable a little bit, and if you don't want to do it with me, do it with Sarah or one of the other folks, or do it with another agent on the team. Do it for each other, but actually go through and do the exercise. Find a property, I suggest find a friend or somebody you know and say, listen, I need to do a CMA for class for my job. Can I come over and do a listing presentation for you? I've done that a couple of times and walked away with a listing because people are like, oh, I didn't know I could get that kind of money for the house. We've been talking about whether we should move. I did it more as hey, do me a favor. Let me run through my pitch. And it turns into a good conversation. So But you don't want to be practicing in front of your first big listing opportunity for a $2.5 million house and you don't feel like you're ready to go. So put the time and effort in to do some practice runs and practice the pricing stuff. Be comfortable putting the listing stuff together, you know, look at it, see if the things that you think off the bat that you would customize. Because when you run it through and practice, you're going to see, okay, I don't love that flow. Like maybe I would, sometimes people just organize this differently. They would like a different flow because of how they're going to talk through things. Or maybe they just, oh, there's not a page on this. And that seems to come up in a lot of my listing presentations. Let me add that in. Sarah's happy to do that for you. We're happy to do that. And if it's something that's applicable, we'll add it across the board if it makes sense. If it's something we're kind of, I've done a lot of building these, so I think you're pretty comprehensive, but you never know based on the market.
Also, the pages are not numbered for that reason. You'll have to pull the table of contents, but if you have a way of talking about things in order you like to go through, the pages can be swapped in and out. And sometimes there are certain things that aren't appropriate, maybe for certain listings that you don't want to be in there. So you can just pull those out with, you know, a little consequence in terms of them knowing that a page is missing.
Absolutely. All right, you're armed and ready to go. Remember, listing contract should be for 6 months to a year, because again, you don't want to put all this money into photography and everything and then not have your time. You know, and please don't, it's, you know, 3% on the listing side. Talk to them about what they want to offer the buyer rep. If they say they don't know what they want to offer on the buyer rep, talk about what happens if you bring a buyer to the table, and please don't discount that too, because you've got just as much liability, if not more. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there's an opportunity that a buyer's going to show up at the open house and want help writing the offer and stuff. So, you know, let's talk about what that would look like. Maybe that's a case where you talk about the 5% total, or, you know, at least should be at least 5% total. No reason not to go 6. I question whether you're really hitting objections or if you're making the objections if all your contracts come in low. If you're leaving money on the table, do the math. Do out like a couple of $500,000 sales, the difference between 2.5% and 3% at your splits, a lot of money. And then really think about, do I want to have to do another whole deal to make up that money, or do I want to just be smart about every deal that I do? Good. Anything on your end, Sophia? No? All right, guys, appreciate your time today. Let me know when you're ready to do some practice runs. I think what we'll put on the calendar coming up in the next couple of months, probably about a month out, is a run through one with, I'll give you a property to actually research and everything, and we'll all get together and see how you did your data and your research and your pricing and all that stuff too. So we can do that too. That's always
I
very
love
helpful.
that.
Yeah, that's always helpful. I give them a case study.
Yeah.
We'll do that soon. Actually, we can do that in the next couple of weeks because I can do that remote. So, okay. All right, guys, make it a good one.